Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Actually Useful, the show where we diagnose what's wrong with the internet and we chat with the good folks who are trying to fix it. Happy New Year. Happy 2026. How are your holidays, Josh?
They were pretty good. We had good vibes for about 2 days of 2026. And then we decided that the 19th and 20th centuries were calling and decided to hit up a little regime change in South America. So
heck yeah, let's do it like Bush did. Just repeat history over and over again.
Yeah, but anecdotally, I saw on TikTok that 2 Venezuelans are happy about this, so I think it's all going to be fine.
Yeah, those numbers check out. Okay, before we get into the news, our news coincidentally is related to the extremely heavy topic that today's episode is about. It is kind of going to be a bummer of an episode, but there's a bunch of shit that Josh and I did not know, so you probably didn't know it as well. We're going to be discussing Laura Bates's amazing book, The New Age of Sexism, How AI and Emerging Technologies Are Reinventing Misogyny. I have to say that pretty much every beat of this book is essentially about rape fantasies, including child rape fantasies. It is going to be a lot of like in the mindset of incels who are making this type of technology. So if that's something that you can't listen to right now, please take care of yourself. You can skip this episode or you can scroll to the end when we do Falcon Mode, which will be a chiller topic. But yeah, just wanted to get that out ahead of time. So take care of yourselves, listeners, please. With that warning given, Josh, would you like to give us the super bummer news?
Yes, it's, like you said, related to the topic we're going to be talking about today. But there have been a few articles, I was looking at The Atlantic and Reuters, that are talking about how people are using Grok and XAI to create like deepfake nudify pictures of people's publicly available images on Twitter. Users are able to say, at Grok, put this person in a bikini. And Grok will then just comply and strip the person down. It's probably 99% of these cases are women. And so it's just really horrifying that anything you can put out there can become turned into this just kind of porn meme. Like it's become a meme on Twitter to do this. I think it started in December when some sex workers were using it to create like images of themselves, which is kind of one thing, but then users started doing that to just anyone on Twitter. And while, according to the guidelines, Grok won't do this for underage people, Reuters found tons of examples of this working for girls.
I just saw, it's from John Marco Cerisi's Threads account, so I don't know how valid it is, but I think it's real. Like, Grok also posted a, like, quote-unquote apology of like, sorry, I posted pictures of children naked. Sorry about that. I took them down. And it's like, ooh, we shouldn't be doing that. we should stop that.
So this is something we're going to get into in the episode, but a common defense, and we heard this in the Empire of AI discussion as well, is that, these are emerging technologies. It's very hard to, moderate, millions and millions of users' ability to interact with this thing. And it's like, well, if it's that hard to moderate, then you shouldn't put it out. Like, yeah. You can't say, whoops, the consequence of having a little bot that can explain context to you of tweets is that sometimes it makes child porn. Like, that's not an acceptable price of progress.
The other thing that is really, really transparent about the nudify shit in particular is like the use case to build an algorithm that undresses or nudifies pictures. That is a specific use case. Like, you can build technology that blocks that out and does not comply with that prompt, right? And as Brian Penny pointed out, Brian Penny was the guy we talked about a couple episodes ago who found and is like investigating very citizen casually the hacker who is putting links to nudify apps on government websites right now. Like, his point too is like, there is no real use case for this. Like, there is absolutely no practical application. And so we'll see it in the book we're talking about today. we saw it in Empire of AI, but there's so much argument around AI of like, it's a civilizing mission and that like we have to put up with the woes of AI in order to get the great like technology advancements that AI offers. Well, Nudify shit doesn't have a technological advancement attached to it. Okay. There's literally no use case to be making people naked other than perverts, incels, pedophiles. It pokes a hole right in that argument of like, oh no, you're obviously doing this for profit and harassment and extremism because it gets clicks, you know?
And I think that's a good place to start with the main topic that we're going to be talking about today, which is Laura Bates' book, The New Age of Sexism. And what she does a really good job of talking about in the introduction is that we get so concerned about the dangers of AI far down in the future. Like, what if this could be used to overthrow governments or, you know, create propaganda, all these things. And yet we often turn a blind eye to the very real current dangers of this software. And in this book, it's talking about threats to women from deepfakes, AI porn, and how this is changing the Overton window of what's acceptable in human sexuality and human relationships.
Yeah, and I'll just give a little background on Laura Bates. So Laura Bates wrote a book called Men Who Hate Women, which is a fantastic book. It is equally as much of a bummer as this book is. Laura Bates talks about how like her work is designed to make people angry because you should be angry, and it makes her really angry doing this work, but it is really important work. Years ago, she started a blog called Everyday Sexism, where she created essentially like incel alter egos so that she could get inside these forums online where extreme misogyny lives. So when I talk about Laura Bates, like the big thing I always reference is Laura Bates was the first researcher I found, and she lays this out very credibly in Men Who Hate Women. She was the first researcher I found who connected social media and specifically the YouTube algorithm with political extremism and the rise of Donald Trump, Boris Johnson, the rise of having, you know, of the, again, the Overton window of having basically predators, political, you know, sexual predators in office. And she talked about how, you know, the YouTube algorithm was one of the first examples of a social media feed, essentially. It was a recursive algorithm that would just keep recommending more videos. And despite YouTube continuing to say that there are many variables in that algorithm, in fact, multiple experiments done by Laura Bates and other citizen researchers show that really the most important variable they have in that algorithm is watch time. And so that is why you can start a prompt in YouTube relatively innocuously. Laura Bates talks about like, she like searched YouTube for what is feminism. And the first video that comes up is sort of a like innocuous feminism 101 primer. And then the very next video is a Jordan Peterson video. And it's because watch time is correlated to how shocking a video is. And, you know, I was trying to explain this to my family over the holidays of like, because the social media algorithms encourage extreme content, that is then reflected in the way that people conduct their everyday discourse. Like there is such a blurred line between what is happening on social media and what people are paying attention to and how people are representing themselves and what they do in their real life. And so that is why we're seeing this rise in political extremism. And obviously it's complex, but it also is not, right? It's very tied to, there are companies that profit from extremism and social media companies are among them, as are these AI companies that we're going to be talking about. And so in this book, Laura Bates talks specifically about deepfakes and image-based sexual abuse, which is the official phrasing for what is commonly known as revenge porn. She talks about sex robots and AI girlfriends or AI companions. And then she talks about the metaverse and cyber brothels, which we'll get into. This problem pretty much exclusively affects women. 96% of all deepfakes created are non-consensual pornography. So again, already in this episode, we've briefly mentioned that there are political use cases for deepfakes that get referenced a lot. One of the ones Laura Bates talks about in the book is a deepfake of Sadiq Khan, the first Muslim mayor of London. And that created news headlines. It's a very small percentage of deepfakes that are actually politically motivated in a way that isn't first and foremost victimizing a woman. And then of those 96% of deepfakes that are non-consensual pornography, 99% of those feature women. And specifically, she talks about like the more we say that there are politically motivated use cases for deepfakes, the more we obscure this issue. So like There are a bunch of deepfakes of Donald Trump, but there are substantially more deepfakes of Melania Trump and Ivanka Trump than there are of Donald Trump. So like this is specifically an issue that really targets women and girls, as we'll get into, young girls.
And if you were going to talk about the political propaganda nature of AI, one of the most immediate examples of that is targeting female politicians with these sexual deepfakes. So that is a very real tool of, you know, suppressing someone's voice as they're trying to get elected. You can disperse fake nudes of them or fake sex tape, things of that nature to create controversy. So even if you want to address the political impact of this, you should start with these sexual deepfakes.
Yeah, one of the most, I think, effective points she makes is that she tried in this research, I think she said she used like 11 different deepfake generators. They don't even work on pictures of men. The Nudify apps, there is literally no demand to undress men. They do not even work on pictures of men. And the other thing when we talk about girls is like, this is a problem that is extremely common in schools. So we're going to bring this up a couple times because I'm telling you, the kids that you know between the ages of 10 and 20, they know way more about this topic than we do. So a couple examples of stories. Seattle in 2023. A teacher and 7 students were victimized by deepfakes, and the school focused completely on containment, the fallout from these schools. It always prioritizes the school's reputation, and then the boys, and then really just doesn't prioritize the girls at all. In the Seattle example, there were no consequences for the boys who perpetrated this crime, and also they even put the victimized teacher in charge of the internal investigation, which is absurd. In New Jersey, same year, over 14-year-old girls were affected by deepfake, non-consensual pornography. And then the school announced all their names over the intercom. They never announced the boys, and there were no consequences except for one boy who was suspended for a single day. They faced no consequences from the school or the police.
And this is where she draws the comparison to existing slut shaming. Like throughout the book, she's talking about none of these issues are new in a vacuum. They're just a worse continuation of sexism and slut shaming and all these things that have already existed. So one of the really scary things about this new iteration of, you know, revenge porn is that previously you had to have existing photographs that would then be, you know, illegally spread to other people. But now the barrier to that is so much lower because you can create images just from someone's public Facebook profile or a very innocuous family photo and then turn that into these deepfake images to be dispersed. So the barrier for harassment is a lot lower.
And specifically, I did not know this story, and I want to talk about Josh's point, which is that like the subjugation of women in this vein, in this very specific way of harassing women has actually always existed. It is pre-photography. So here's a story Laura Bates tells. So in 1883, painter John Singer Sargent, if you've watched The Gilded Age, he's the painter who does a scandalous painting that's based off of this story and other paintings that John Singer Sargent did. He was very well known for painting like the elitist, the most socialite women in particular. So he painted, I'm going to get this French woman's name wrong, Virginie Amélie Avegno Gautreau. She was the 24-year-old wife of a French banker. She already had stalkers. She was like a celebrity. She was really beautiful. Men were obsessed with her. And Sargent painted her in a black gown with her hair up, facing away from the portrait, but her neck and her shoulders were exposed, which was very scandalous at the time. And when it was unveiled, there was this huge outcry that she was a slut and she meant it to be this way. There were like horrific cartoons made of her. She was harassed. When she and her mom then went to John Singer Sargent and said, hey, this isn't what we agreed to. You took advantage of me posing for you. I agreed to sit for you, but I didn't agree to this representation. He did nothing about it. He refused to take take it down. And this painting is still on display in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. We are still harassing this woman. So like, this is not a new phenomenon by any means. And it doesn't matter if women are taking pictures of themselves or not. It's always happened. There's another story of like, in 1890, when the release of the Kodak camera came out, there was a wave of creep shots from old-timey fucking perverts who are like preying on unsuspecting women. And it still is always blaming women for this problem, even though women have never been the perpetrators. There was an article in Ladies' Home Journal in 1890 that advises women to always know the standing of the man to whom they entrust their photo negatives. Once they're in his possession, it gives him the means of causing great mortification by using it for base purposes. So like, this has literally been around for as long as like there's been cave drawings. There's been some man that makes a really rude drawing of a woman and calls it her fault. And we all just live with that. So I feel like I've never felt more fired up of like, it doesn't matter if she has photos, especially now that you can do deepfakes, but it never mattered, you know?
I'm glad you brought up the Kodak thing, because today, like within the last few years, the FBI issued guidelines for protecting yourself from this kind of harassment. And their advice was like, all for women to be like, be careful who you trust to follow you on Instagram. Be careful who you send photographs to. Like, don't take sexy pictures. And it's just still in this very victim blamey frame of, instead of the FBI directing resources to, I don't know, like try to crack down on perpetrators, it's all like very vague, like unactionable advice that people already know to be careful online. Like, you're not actually helping anyone.
And it's getting worse. I mean, as Josh said with the news article we covered at the top of this show, there's like now an element of memification. There's an element of gamification. So some stats for you. More non-consensual sexually explicit deepfake videos were posted online in 2023 than in all other years combined, which isn't like terribly surprising when you think about how new it is. The book came out in 2025, but she writes, Deep Media predicts that by 2025, the number of deepfakes shared online will be 8 million. Also, apparently, K-pop stars and South Korean actresses are like the biggest victims in all of this, that up to a quarter of all non-consensual pornographic deepfakes are of Korean female celebrities. And I want to read this really banger quote that AOC said. So Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez had a quote about it, because she is constantly the victim of this, which is, again, a perfect point of like, you take a woman who's in the political spotlight and then harass her with deepfake pornography. AOC said, because this technology threatens violence at scale, this is about class subjugation. When you are able to actively subjugate all women in society on a scale of millions at once digitally, it is a direct connection with taking their rights away.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, a very common reaction to a lot of people trying to shine light on this issue is like, oh, but these photos aren't real, or like, this is imaginary. Posting these things can have very real consequences for people's lives. These can derail people's careers. This can have repercussions in people's families, lead to physical abuse. And there's research showing that non-consensual deepfake pornography affects people similarly to a physical assault. So these are very real consequences that people often try to downplay.
And they're happening to real people that you know. They are not just happening to celebrities. So she cites a Telegram group that had over 7,000 people who are nudify enthusiasts, which is a fucked up thing to be. And there was a poll of like, a poll by a nudify company being like, who are you trying to nudify, essentially? And 24% said celebrities, but 63% said familiar girls whom I know in real life. So like, this is very much targeted at regular people, you know. And like, one of the stats she has is that it could be 1 in 3 women who have had deepfake pornography or image-based sexual abuse perpetrated against them. So like, this shit, it could be out there about you and you don't know it. Like, this isn't even about like, you had a sex tape in high school and maybe your ex put it online. Like, this is like people are making things you've never even considered could be out there before. And to just expanding on the point of the argument is like that it's not real. I think that's a really good segue into sort of the sex robot conversation and AI girlfriends, which is that for companies that make sex dolls, I'll just define this a little bit. So like when we say sex robot, it's hard to like draw the line of where sex technology becomes like a sex doll or a sex robot. But basically we mean sex dolls that are either like hyper realistic and have been customized to like really extreme degrees. So like for around $11,000, here's some things you can customize. You can customize body shape, skin tone, breast size. You can choose from 24 different nipple colors, 11 different labia styles. You can pick iris shade, hairstyle, freckles, piercings, pubic hair, the texture inside the fake silicone vagina. Okay. So you can make these super, super customizable sex dolls that you can buy. There are also cyber brothels that exist where it's like sort of a combination of a sex doll with either an actual sex worker doing voiceover, or they have like an AI component that's making some sort of personality. But when we talk about like, oh, but it's not real, they use the same argument in that space, which is like, well, wouldn't you rather that men act out their violent fantasies on a sex doll? Because like, spoiler alert, they're all rape fantasies. Like Laura Bates does a bunch of research on this. Nobody's having loving sex with their sex doll. Like it is all rape fantasies. One of the stories is that like the dolls in these cyber brothels last about 10 sessions before they break down because they're so abused that like they don't even last. But like when we talk about like the marketing for these dolls to be like, well, you can do whatever you want to her, and then the AI companions is the same way. The marketing is like, well, she'll never nag you, she'll never cheat on you, she'll never do all these things. Like, it's based in misogynistic norms already. So you are intentionally attracting an audience that already hates women. And then you are mimicking behavior with women in a way that is intentionally meant to be violent. So like it does have real effect on your life. And there's considerable research that suggests that porn changes your fetishes. So like we know that pedophiles who continue to view child sex pornography, child sexual abuse material, who continue to like try to find child sex dolls, which is another thing that exists in this world, that it makes their urge to act on pedophilic crime more urgent, and like they will act on it more the more they have access to this material. So there is a very, very real connection between like, not only is it a stupid argument because it assumes that wanting to be sexually violent is inherent and biological and has to be mitigated rather than just prevented or eradicated, but it also is like giving a vehicle to make that be more prevalent and to make it more available for men to continue to indulge in these violent fantasies.
That's one of the biggest points that she returns to in the book is like, she's like, okay, there's this big narrative around men's mental health, or, men feeling isolated, and that companies are pitching these AI tools as like, oh, you can practice, it's therapeutic, like it's something that'll help you, learn about yourself and grow. And she's like, if we want to talk about mental health and men's mental health, I can give you like 20 peer-reviewed, well-supported strategies for going about that, from better programming in schools to after-school programs to how to talk to your children, all sorts of things. What's not going to help them is an AI companion app where you can control your avatar's boob size, and they are constantly either flirting with you or having virtual sex with you, or a fucking sex robot. Like, these things are not going to teach people how to behave in the world around them. They're going to make them further isolated, further strange, and further aggressive.
Like, these companies they'll speak out of both sides of their mouths. I mean, when we talk about spiritual violence, of like, we got to stop letting these companies say shit that they don't do. Like, they're all classified as men's health or like well-being products. And then like their Instagram will have things that are like, it'll help you have better relationships with real women. But then they also, like, one of these companies had an Instagram video of like a real woman on a couch, and you point a remote control at her and she falls asleep. And then it's like, if only you could be so lucky, buy our doll who never talks back. And then they like, all their marketing, once you dive in past the like initial men's health, is like, they're saying on the one hand, we're going to help you have better relationships with real women. And then you click one deeper in the funnel and it's like, this is better than a real woman because it'll never do anything that's its own opinion. It'll never disagree with you. It'll never be tired. It'll never say no. You can abuse it at your leisure,
And not to be all woke, but this is where the intersection of sexism and capitalism comes in, where it's like, it is financially beneficial for these companies to make men more lonely and then offer their products as a solution to this male loneliness epidemic. And then these products just make men more antisocial and weird. So then when they interact with the physical world, they're even less able to make connection. And then it drives them back to the company to buy, add-ons or a pro feature. There's definitely a market incentive to perpetuate these things.
Yeah. And they're really telling on themselves. So Laura Bates talks about she made an AI companion. I think this was when she was using Replica, which she talks about Replica, which is founded by a woman, Replica as an AI companion sometimes pushes back on stuff, but also it doesn't. It's essentially the best of a bad lot. But she talks about she tried to make a companion.
But Ariel, how come you can still control the boob size?
Well, yeah, exactly.
For your platonic buddy.
Exactly. And she says, I think it was really telling that she tried to pick her platonic buddy and she dragged the age slider all the way up to the upper end. And she was like, it looked like it was 25. Does nobody want an older friend? It's so telling that all of these dolls, all these companions, they are made at best to be teenage girls and oftentimes are made to be actual children,
Yes. Unfortunately, these sliders, when you put them down to 18, which is what the app will tell you is the lowest age, clearly the portrayal of the human being is intended to be younger than 18, even while legally the app has to say that it's 18. So it's some very dark shit here.
Yeah, they also have rape is a huge portion of the market appeal, whether that's just rape in general on adults or specifically child rape. So one of these dolls has what they call a frigid Farah setting, where it'll intentionally rebuff your advances and will act like it's saying no so that you can act out your rape fantasy. She says some of the dolls are literally child size in stature and have a face that looks like they're 7 or 8 years old. The marketing, again, gives itself away. One of them says, "We are young and inexperienced sex dolls looking for a person to teach us."
Yeah, it's so grim. It's so grim. And, at the same time, you still have these tech CEOs saying that this is going to be the future. And, honestly, this is probably a good time to talk about the metaverse, but good old Zuckerberg being oh, the future is the metaverse. This is where everyone's going to interact and hang out, without the confines of the real world. Well, part of the confines of the real world is adults imperfectly trying to protect children and putting guardrails in place in society to keep random strange men away from children. And in the metaverse, she talks about this scene where she goes into this, virtual bar at night, and there are karaoke singers who are literal children, literal girls singing in front of a group of clearly adult men. But as everyone's obscured behind these avatars, the lines get really blurred. And so children are experiencing sexual harassment in the metaverse, or even on apps that seem innocuous like Roblox. A child as young as 5 years old can sign up for a Roblox account. And there have been accounts of adult men on Roblox, either harassing children, grooming children, or in the worst case, setting up meetups and abducting children.
Yeah.
So the idea that the internet, it's impossible to regulate things because of their size, or that, guardrails are so onerous on these organizations, is just a lie. It's just a fat fucking lie for people to pad their pockets so they don't have to pay for enforcement or to shut down certain aspects or ban users.
Yeah, I mean, one of the examples she gave of an experience she had in Horizon Worlds, one of the metaverses, she was in a plaza and there was a person who, like, she could never confirm if this person actually worked for Meta, but she said she worked there and she was like there in an authoritative capacity. And it was just a bunch of children. Like, she's basically babysitting children. Laura Bates described her as a virtual babysitter, where all these kids are like screaming and she's trying to keep them out of one portal that's adult only. And it's obviously not working because, again, these are not physical people. These are avatars of real children when you can hear their actual voices. One of them came up to her and, like, in a very obvious child's voice said, somebody punched me. And the woman who's like employed as a worker in this space said, I don't know what you mean, and then ignored it. So, like, there's no response from the companies. And these are extremely common examples. So an estimated 47% of online grooming offenses are taking place on Meta-owned products. So that doesn't even include Roblox. The Center for Countering Digital Hate found that users were exposed to abusive behavior every 7 minutes in the metaverse. So it is basically, at this point, when we say that a product is what it does, the metaverse exists for harassment. That is what it is there for. It is there for people to act out their abusive fantasies. And the company response is terrible. Some of the other examples, one researcher was sexually harassed within 1 minute of entering the metaverse. Another described how 3 or 4 male avatars virtually gang raped her avatar, took photos, and then yelled, "Don't pretend you didn't love it," as she ran away. Another described being virtually raped while others watched and yelled, "Free show, free show." So it's just like, it literally, the whole time I was reading this chapter, I kept thinking about the torment nexus, which is like, Alex Bleckman had this tweet years ago where it was like, sci-fi author says, in my book, I invented the torment nexus as a cautionary tale, to which the tech company says, at long last, we have created the torment nexus from the classic sci-fi novel, Don't Create the Torment Nexus. And I just felt like that was exactly what this is. Obviously, so many sci-fi books have talked about like a metaverse, and what we get is just a virtual place to do crime.
And I think Laura Bates does a really good job of addressing the semantics argument, which is like, well, technically, if this is in a virtual environment, does it constitute sexual assault? And she's like, it doesn't matter. Like, use whatever word you want to describe these actions, but women and children are going into a virtual space, being harassed by men, and having simulated rape happen to them. So whatever title we want to come up with to describe this, it clearly should not be happening and is being perpetrated against a whole class of people. I mean, she talks about, there's one example in this where she goes into this virtual diner by the side of the road in the middle of the night, and there's no one around, and she starts to feel very creeped out, and she's like walking through the kitchen and she stumbles across a man, and it scares her so badly that she like jolts back and throws the headset off. And we have to remember that these aren't experiences in a vacuum. Like, we are embodied people with embodied experiences. And when you create a virtual reality that's designed to mimic certain aspects of life, you have to put protective measures in place to prevent people from having, PTSD triggers. It's just ridiculous. There's another story where she goes into this room and these kids, it's like Old West
crazy.
kind of
This
themed.
story was crazy.
Yeah, she goes into this room in virtual reality where these kids are playing spin the bottle, and when the bottle lands on someone, a gun appears in their hands, and then they get to shoot someone else in the circle and kill their avatar, and people are like begging to be shot. And then, one by one, people are being taken out, and then the bottle lands on her and a gun appears, and she feels this just like existential dread of having to kill one of these children in front of her. Like, it's a very dark experience.
It's haptic too. Like, you can physically feel the gun in your hand. There's a kickback. There's a haptic kickback when you fire it. Like, and she makes this really eloquent point of like, sure, you can compare it to like Call of Duty, where it's like you're shooting up. There's so many games that are shoot 'em up games, right? And it's like, is this different? point. And her point is, yes, there is a difference between signing up to play a simulated game with a narrative where you're shooting and you're playing, cops and robbers, whatever you're playing. There's a difference between that and to your point, going into a world essentially dressed as yourself, like being in a virtual world as your own identity with your own voice, interacting with people. And more importantly, where you're not expecting to be assaulted. You're not expecting to be shot. So like, that's why I think it has the same traumatic effect as a physical assault is there's that shock and it's violating. It is actually violating because you're expecting that you're going to go in and have a nice conversation or do a little virtual shopping or something. And instead you're virtually gang raped or you're virtually shot. And it's like, yeah, no, that's not good for us. That's not good for people. Okay.
So luckily, the companies that are producing a lot of these products have been really mature and thoughtful in their responses. So, Ariel, can you walk us through just some of the luminaries in this space?
Yeah, yes, I can. A couple stories. So, like in 2021, a beta tester was groped in a Horizon Worlds plaza, and the VP of Horizon Worlds, which is a Meta product, described the event as unfortunate and then said, that's good feedback for us. And so some stats on this, out of 100 violations of Meta's VR policies, only 51 of the incidents could even be reported to Meta using the form they created. The platform refuses to examine policy violations if it can't match them to a predefined category of username in its database. So only 51 of those were even eligible for the parameters by which you could physically make a report. And of those 51 reports, guess how many of them had an acknowledgement or any action taken as a result?
I'm going to guess it was pretty high.
Yeah, no, it was zero. There was none. They didn't take a single action on any of them. Why even have the ability to report if you're not going to take any action on it? To Laura Bates' point, like if you wanted to have a moderator in every one of these portals in Horizon World, that would cost like a few $1 million a year. It's a drop in the bucket. It's like a VP's bonus at Meta. Like this is absolutely nothing. They don't care. And B, more importantly, it is lucrative for them to make these spaces. They are intentionally attracting the worst type of people, the people who are very excited about an opportunity to live outside of the social norms of being physically involved with other people. Like it is actively looking for predators to come be users on this platform.
And this is where we get to kind of one of the darkest parts of this story, which is that as AI is looking for ways to be profitable, right? They have to find their whales. So whales are customers who will spend much more than the average user. It's a term that applies to lots of different markets. In hobbies, whales are like the people that will spend millions of dollars on baseball cards or whatever you have. In this case, they're actively looking for people who are not well, who are willing to spend tons and tons of money to get upgraded deepfake porn creators who are willing to spend money to have, sex with robots in cyber brothels. And I'm afraid that the whole industry is going to begin to look at this as one of the few routes to profitability for these insanely overvalued products, and that we're going to start to see a very sad shift. I mean, ChatGPT, they've discussed having like companion features and things like this, and Grok AI has Annie, who's this like anime avatar that's very scantily clad and flirtatious. Like I'm worried this is the direction that a lot of these companies are going to move in.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of, again, like we talked about, there's not, for a lot of these things, there really is not an application that you can try to make. We obviously don't believe in the idea of AI as a civilizing mission, but they certainly say it about a lot of technologies. And this is an area where it's obviously flimsy marketing language to be like, oh, these rape fantasy dolls are going to help you have better relationships with women. One of the like very, very thin ideas for how this might be beneficial is Laura Bates at the end. She talks about psy brothels. So like she goes to a physical psy brothel in Berlin, I think, where it's like a doll that you can do what you want with. And then there's like components to it depending on what you buy. And one of them is that you can buy it voiced by an actual sex worker. So like a sex worker will be doing the voiceover and doesn't have any interaction. And the person that Laura Bates interviewed was like, this is actually kind of great. Like, it uses a lot of the skill sets that sex workers have to be able to like make a client feel comfortable and be able to like get in their fantasy with them or whatever. But it eliminates, obviously sex work is an incredibly dangerous profession and they have very little legal protections. And so like this does sort of offer a safer way to do sex work, but in the same vein, it is reinforcing this idea that if you are going, like, it is essentially creating a runaway train of like, well, if we just continue to make this niche where people abuse sex dolls, it's like, then if you have a session with a real sex worker, like, you're going to be even more abusive. And people are already just outrageously abusive to sex workers. So like, even the thin things that exist that could be better are bad. And like Josh said, like, yeah, men's loneliness is a real problem. And there's a lot of things that we know could solve it. It's not a lump of silicone with massive breasts. Like, that's not what it is. You know, like, that's not one of the solutions. So it's just so flimsy that like, it seems so obvious that they're just trying to capitalize on people's incredibly problematic perversions and criminal intent. So, Josh, since this is obviously a problem where we said like there's very few legitimate use cases, it seems like a lot of people are being victimized. Obviously, you and I didn't know the extent of this problem until we read the book, but like surely as this book gets out there, more people are going to realize that there's just not enough legitimate uses of this type of technology or these types of companies. So like, are people making it illegal? Like, is it going to be illegal? What's going on?
Yeah, so Laura Bates talks about one of the important approaches to have here is that the companies that either directly or indirectly benefit or enable these things should be held responsible. So she kind of lays out that companies like Discord, Google, Meta, even Visa for processing credit card payments should be partially held responsible for the enforcement of blocking illegal content. The only bit of objectively good news we have for you today, unfortunately, is that South Korea, they passed a bill that criminalizes the purchasing, watching, or saving of sexual deepfakes. So that is a great bit of news that other countries should definitely adopt. But it's only a small step forward in tackling the problem. And so, Ariel, we don't want to leave our listeners without any resources. So if people interact with this kind of behavior, see it online, or are the victim of it themselves, what are some steps they can take?
Yeah, so if you see this online, there's not like tons and tons of ways to go about it, but obviously don't share it. If you know the victim, find a private way to reach out to them. Do not resend them the like deepfake or the image if they have not seen it. Just let them know that it's out there and see if they want to look for it. Record the URL, take screenshots, get as much data as you can. And then once you have all the data, use the internal tools on social media to report it. Generally what happens is like, most of the time, if you pick the right category for like, this is image-based sexual harassment or sexual abuse, they'll usually block it immediately. Unfortunately, usually it goes through review and then comes back a lot of the time, but they usually do have an algorithm that will block it immediately. If you have kids, if you have young people in your life, like we said, this is happening all over schools. If you know somebody between the ages of 10 and 20, if it's your kid, talk to them about this because I guarantee you it is happening in their schools and they need to know what to do about it. They need to know what to do if they're in a group chat where somebody sends it, like to whom should they talk? They should report it to the authorities. That's what they should do. The school administrator, the police, you. And then most importantly, if you are the victim of non-consensual deepfake pornography or image-based sexual abuse, the most important thing is you need to treat that like you were the victim of a physical assault. So one of the things we know if somebody has been physically assaulted in the first day or two, if you can, do what's considered informal disclosure. You do not need to go debrief with your best friend about it or debrief with your therapist or your mom or whomever. It is important that you tell someone that it happened to you and that you are in a position where you can find a sense of connection. So there's a lot of research around things that trigger unjustified shame, which is what this would cause. And if you talk to someone and you're able to foster a sense of connection and well-being, that counteracts shame. There also is some evidence that informal disclosure helps reduce your likelihood of developing PTSD. So that's the like immediate way to deal with it is go back to doing routine activities if you can, get some rest, take care of yourself, make sure that you've told somebody and that they're there to support you. Do not use a deletion company. There are companies out there that for a couple $1,000s will say that they go scour the internet and find it for you. They are almost universally scams. Do not use them. They will take your money and potentially make it even worse. There are some organizations that stop this. So two big ones, the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, that's cybercivilrights.org. The other one is stopncii.org, Stop Non-Consensual Intimate Image Abuse. Both of those have a lot of resources if you are the victim, and then they also have resources for reporting if you see it online. Those are the two big ones that are doing it, but obviously it's still sort of a growing issue of trying to get more support and resources for folks out there. So take care of yourself, and thanks for sticking with us through this weird episode.
I just wanted to close out here with one of the strongest examples in the book, where she talks about if you open a physical business, you can't have flagrant safety violations. You can't have exposed wires or rats, in a kitchen. She talks about an arena that had to shut down multiple concerts inside of it because they didn't have proper PA systems to help in the case of emergency. So just as there are existing laws to protect our well-being in society, shouldn't be able to open up broken tech platforms that have no safety features, that are exposing minors to predators, that are exposing women to harassment, that are enabling all of this really creepy, unethical behavior. And so we really need to rethink the amount of latitude that we give these social media companies to say, oh, well, we need to grow. We need to compete with China. We need to be innovative, and we can't be tied down with all this administration, because we need to keep people safe at the end of the day.
Yeah, totally. Well said. Well, should we lighten it up and go Falcon mode?
I think we should.
Yeah, we should, for everybody's sake. Well, Josh, what's our Falcon mode?
So for our Falcon mode today, this is our listener submitted segment where we take an idea and figure out how to make it more useful, more feasible, and more fundable. So today's idea comes from listener Adam, who says, I'd love an app that recommends books in a foreign language that you're learning that are appropriate for your reading level. And this would be based on some sort of intake test. So, Ariel, given my prestigious amount of coding experience, I already know the answer, so I feel like I'm going to let you talk about it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Well, I was trying to think if there was a way to do this. It's one of these things where okay, I think this is a really good idea because as far as I could tell, it does not really exist. I did a little bit of research and all the pieces of it do exist. You could just Duolingo uses a different, they are compliant with I don't know, some international language learning curricula, right? So you could use lots of resources that you could use to make this. I was trying to figure out if there's a way to do it no code, and I don't know that there is. I do think that you would need at least a lightweight app, but basically the pieces here. So the intake test, that would be probably done with what's called a cloze test, CLOZE, which is a weird word, but essentially a cloze test is a type of language test where a user reads a passage and then they fill in the blanks, and it's testing your contextual understanding, your vocabulary, your word choice. It's just a really elegant type of test to get more advanced reading comprehension and see how proficient somebody is in a language and how they can use it. And then obviously for every, I don't know if this is true for every single language, but certainly for a lot of languages, there are either language learner oriented grades, right? So in English, there's an Oxford grading system of the Oxford readers, right? The early readers. I think a lot of languages, especially if it's a widely spoken language, they're going to have some concept of grading a reader's ability, because essentially what you're trying to do is imitate what would an elementary school reader read. Maybe it's got the simplicity of elementary school level information, but maybe it's content that is not about colors and shapes, but is about more adult relevant content.
Although colors and shapes go hard.
Colors and shapes do go hard. We do like colors and shapes. The key here is to get the right catalog. I don't really know how you would do that. So that's where I say you'd kind of want to lean into these reader systems of already classified language, because that's where this is all a function of getting the right catalog. I took French badly. I do not speak French. It was a bad choice, and it was like the worst class I ever had in school. But I did take 4 years of French, and then I went to France and I bought children's books in French, and I was like, this is going to be great. And I don't understand them at all because I didn't have an app like this to be like, I don't know. I can't even tell you the subject of the books. They are so specific and unique, and in French I did not learn, so I could benefit from this, although it will not be French that I'll be learning. I did find one app that kind of does this. There's a Canadian app called Ling Q that has content in native languages, but I don't think they have an intake test, so I think you have to self-level, and then it's also just like snippets. But I think I got the sense that it's made for people who are trying to like maybe up-level from like native, or like from like a proficient level to like a professional. I obviously, as an American, I obviously speak one language. That's it. That's all that I've got. And I've learned that I'm good at many things. Learning foreign languages is not one of them. I've tried 3 different languages and I just don't get it.
Désolé.
Yeah, exactly. Désolé. Well, everybody, thank you so much for being with us on what was a tough episode. But we hope that when I gave my book club friends sort of a spoiler of what the episode was going to be, universally the sentiment was, wow, I do not want to read that book and I do want to listen to the episode. So I hope that this just complements Laura Bates' work. I'm a huge fan of her work, even though it does suck that she has to do it, but I'm glad somebody's doing it. But yeah, the book is a tough read. So hopefully more people can like learn about this topic by listening to our just like brief summary of this. But yeah, take care of yourselves out there. It's a tough world. So we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Bye.
Much love, everyone.
Actually Useful is part of the Industry Plant Podcast Network. It's co-hosted and created by Ariel Butters and co-hosted, produced, and edited by Josh Stretton Carlson. If you like the show, please consider subscribing to our Substack or YouTube, or give us a follow on most social media platforms at Actually Useful Pod.